Today we are diving right into one of the most pivotal and, if we're being honest, pretty weird transitions of power in ancient history. We're talking about the very beginning of King David's reign. And it's a story that doesn't kick off with a big party, but with mourning, a divided nation, and a political mess that would shape the future for years to come.
So, here's the big question that really gets this whole story started. David's been anointed king, and his biggest rival, King Saul, is finally out of the picture. You'd think this would be his big moment, right? A huge victory. But it's not. The very first thing he does is mourn the guy who spent years trying to kill him. Why? The answer to that is the key to understanding everything. Not just David's political skill, but the kind of king he was meant to be.
So, to figure this all out, here's our game plan. We'll start with David's strange reaction to Saul's death, and then look at his incredible bond with Jonathan. We'll see how that led to a kingdom split in two, sparked Israel's very first civil war, and ultimately how it all fits into a much bigger story about a divine promise.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story doesn't start in some grand palace. It starts in a dusty little town called Ziklag, and David's whole world is about to get flipped upside down.
So, picture this. A messenger comes running right off the battlefield. He brings devastating news. Israel has been crushed by the Philistines. And then the bombshell. King Saul and his son Jonathan are both dead. And to prove it, he hands David the king's actual crown. I mean, this is it. This is the moment David's been waiting for, the fulfillment of the prophecy that made him an outcast in the first place.
And this is where the messenger makes a huge miscalculation. He basically makes up a story. He claims that he's the one who killed the wounded king, probably thinking, David's gonna love this, I'll get a huge reward for taking out his enemy. But what really happened was that Saul, about to be captured, took his own life. The messenger lied, and man, was that a bad move. So instead of getting this big reward, the messenger gets this, just total, absolute grief. David and his tough, battle-hardened soldiers tear their clothes, which is a really public, dramatic way to show your mourning. There's no party, no cheering, just weeping and refusing to eat. You can just imagine how shocking this would have been for anyone watching. With this one act, David showed everyone what kind of leader he really was.
Okay, so what was really going on here? Let's break it down. First, David has the messenger executed, not for lying, but for boasting that he'd killed the Lord's anointed. In David's eyes, that made Saul untouchable, a king picked by God himself. Saul's death was a national tragedy, and also a pretty scary warning for David. But here's the thing, this wasn't just about personal feelings. It was also, and this is crucial, a brilliant political move. It sent a clear message: my power comes from God, not because I schemed my way to the top.
But David's grief wasn't just for a political rival. It was also incredibly personal, and for a totally different reason. Because on that same battlefield, he lost his best friend, Jonathan.
You see, their relationship is described as something way more than just friendship. It's called a true covenantal love. I mean, this wasn't some casual thing. It was a serious, binding promise, a pact, where they were literally willing to die for each other. It was as solid and unbreakable as any treaty between nations.
And you can really see just how deep this bond was when you look at what they did for each other. Jonathan was the crown prince, next in line for the throne. But he gives David his own royal robes and weapons, basically handing over his status. He knew David was meant to be king, even if it cost him everything. And get this, he literally put his own life on the line, again and again, to save David from his own dad. So yeah, David didn't just lose a friend, he lost a brother.
But you know, grief doesn't stop politics. Even with Saul gone, David's road to the throne was anything but easy. The kingdom didn't just smoothly transition over to him. Oh no, it completely shattered. So what you end up with is this. In the south, you have the tribe of Judah, and they waste no time making David their king. His capital is in Hebron, and his top general is the fierce warrior Joab. But up north, Saul's old commander, a powerful guy named Abner, isn't about to roll over. He takes Saul's last living son, Ish-bosheth, and props him up as king of Israel. All of a sudden, you've got two kings, two capitals, two armies. The whole nation is split right down the middle.
And we're not talking about a quick disagreement here. This went on for 7.5 years. Think about that. For almost a decade, Israel was basically two separate countries, and all that tension was just building and building, getting ready to explode.
And, well, that kind of tension can only last so long before it does explode. And it led to this tragic showdown, brother against brother, in what was essentially Israel's very first civil war.
The whole battle really comes down to this one intense and super tragic chase scene. Joab's little brother, Asahel, was famous for being crazy fast. He zeroes in on the enemy commander, Abner, thinking he can win all this glory by taking him down. Abner, who's a seasoned veteran, knows this is a bad idea. He keeps telling the kid to back off, that he doesn't want to kill him. But Asahel, he's just so driven by this idea of glory, he won't listen. Finally, Abner's cornered, and in a defensive move, he jabs backward with the blunt end of a spear and kills him. It's just such a tragic end, all because of youthful ambition.
Even with that terrible loss of Asahel, the battle itself was, well, it was a blowout for David's side. Joab's forces lost just 19 men. Abner's lost 360. It was a totally one-sided win, and it was a huge sign of which way the winds were blowing.
But according to the source material, the really important thing here wasn't just who had the better soldiers. It was seen as a sign of God's providence. It was viewed as real, solid proof that God was at work, weakening Saul's family line and building up the house of David.
And this all brings us to the real heart of the matter, the big picture takeaway from this entire story. It's all about how God's will and human choices weave together, and the incredible promise it was all leading to.
You see, all this stuff, the grieving, the divided kingdom, the civil war, it's all setting the stage for what is maybe the single most important event in the entire book of 2 Samuel, the Davidic covenant. This is where God makes a formal promise to David that his family, his kingdom, and his throne will last forever.
And the impact of this promise, this covenant, is just massive. It echoes for centuries. In the short term, David finally unites the nation. After him, a long, often messy, line of his descendants sits on the throne. But the ultimate destination of this promise points toward a future Messiah, an eternal king who would fulfill this covenant once and for all.
Now, for a really interesting contrast, let's look at David's story next to his general, Joab's. Joab was an amazing military commander. He won battle after battle for David, but he was also ruthless, driven by revenge and his own ambition. In the end, his life was tragic. He had all the potential to be this great hero, but in the end, his own choices led to his downfall. It's a powerful warning in the middle of David's story.
And that really leaves us with this one big question to chew on. When you look at all these characters, David, Saul, Joab, even young Asahel, what really makes a great leader? Is it all about your own ambition, your own strength, your own glory? Or is it about something else, about humility and finding a way to align yourself with a purpose that's way bigger than you are? That question is at the heart of David's story. And honestly, it's a question we still wrestle with today.